I think that you need to experiment a lot more with the latest technology. I think that you need to network and to build relationships and develop networks when you don't need them. And I think that's really important. And I think that you should approach events that are put to you and also networking possibilities, speaking engagements, especially for leaders. And I think all of that feeds through to having a consistent online presence so that you're consistently posting and sharing relevant and consistent information to your network. And I think that would help leaders today.
Welcome to Leading Through Uncertainty, where we explore how leaders navigate change and complexity. This podcast is part of a series that Odgers is doing to understand what it means to be a leader in today's landscape. In past episodes, we have gained leadership perspectives from across the UK, the US, Europe, and Canada, and today we continue the conversation with insights from Asia. My name is Karen Chiew. I manage the leadership advisory practice at Odgers in Asia Pacific. And in the work that we do with our clients, more and more we see how disruption and the accelerating pace of change is really redefining what it means to be a leader in the region. To explore this further, we are focusing today on the technology sector in Asia, and I'm very happily joined by my colleague Paul Clayson. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Karen. So I'm Paul Clayson, and I'm based here in Singapore. I lead the technology practice for Southeast Asia, and it's a real pleasure to help kick off the APAC Tech Edition. And it's been a very busy year so far with momentous March, and I just returned from London Tech Week, and so I think there'll be plenty for us to unpack today.
Oh, welcome. Thank you. Really looking forward to exploring this. So in line with some of the other podcasts and the series that we have been doing, before we really dive into this, a very quick warm-up, right? And we'd like to start with a series of rapid-fire questions. So no overthinking, and I'm just going to shoot them to you. So just be prepared, and what first comes to mind. Ready?
Ready.
Okay, fantastic. One word to describe tech right now.
Sobering.
What's more dangerous in tech, hype or hesitation?
Hype.
What's the one tech buzzword you're hearing too often?
Ecosystem.
Okay. All right, this is an interesting one. Hire fast or hire slow?
Hire fast, but do the preparation beforehand. So know what you're looking for, have a plan, have a search strategy, go to market, hire fast. Otherwise, you'll be beaten for talent.
Wonderful. And last one, what's one habit great tech leaders all share?
I think continual learning. Continual learning every day. Yeah, learning new things, identifying different areas where they can improve themselves each and every day.
The learning agility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay. So before we dive into things, really like to take a step back for a moment and talk a bit more about your journey, right? And what shaped your perspective. So for this, maybe it's going back a little bit into telling me about your career journey before Odgers, however far back you want to go, but it'd be great to understand you as a person.
Okay, so early career was spent with telecommunications operators in the UK. I worked for 2 different operators, and that gave me my first commercial experience into the workforce. And then the recruitment company that placed me twice then asked me to join them to expand their telecommunications practice in the UK at that time. And so I didn't know what I was in for. But 16 years later, I guess it worked out okay.
Wonderful. And how long have you been in Asia?
I've lived in Asia since 2013, but I was doing search work in the region for about 4 or 5 years prior to that. I was traveling from London to Asia regularly on a plane every sort of 6 weeks during that 4-year period. So racked up a lot of air miles.
For sure. And so what do you think drew you into this kind of work?
I think it was really just trying to understand how I could help people with their careers and also help clients with their challenges. It was never about actually finding people that fit a job description. It was more about actually looking at what the business challenges were, where they were struggling, and how we could find people that fit within the organisation structure for them to be more effective. And that kind of work really appealed to me at that time, rather than more of the commoditized recruitment, which we saw sort of 10, 15 years ago.
Right. And today, what keeps you passionate about it?
I think what keeps me passionate, it sounds a bit corny really, but it really is where you place an executive and you can see the impact that they have on an organisation. You can also see the impact they have on their own careers. And I think looking at a lot of examples over the years, if there hadn't been a third party involved in those processes, they would not have happened. So I think that really keeps me motivated.
Yeah. I don't think that's corny at all. I think that piece around impact and making a difference, I think really, really counts. So in the work that you are doing today, what type of leaders or what type of businesses do you spend most of your time with?
So I spend most of my time with boards and senior leadership teams of communications companies and digital infrastructure firms. Some work with professional services firms in their TMT or CMT practices as well. They're kind of the core clients that I spend most of my time with at the moment.
And across the region, are there specific markets that you're looking at more, focused on a little bit more?
So across the region, the biggest markets would be Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, and of course, our home market here in Singapore.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so diving right in, love to get your thoughts on a few themes that we've picked out for the discussion today. So the technology industry has been going through a lot of uncertainty since 2020. I don't think there's another industry that's been so much in the public eye in recent years, with accelerated growth during COVID, followed by a series of very high-profile layoffs globally, the emergence of AI companies. As an executive search professional, what have been your observations of this roller coaster, and what does it mean in the tech sector, and especially for talent?
Right. So it has to go back 5 years to 2021, post-COVID, when there was a massive uplift in hiring after people were let outdoors again. And the tech companies overhired in most cases. And then there was a compounded effect because during COVID, they had not really rebalanced their workforces that they normally would do. Right. So perhaps held on to staff and not restructured as they normally would have. And that led to a lot more staff in these companies. So the layoffs in 2022 were particularly large. And then we've seen continual reductions or rebalancing since then. But what we've seen with AI is that AI hasn't really replaced that many positions yet. Perhaps some of the more data entry and customer service, customer support level 1 positions, but it actually hasn't replaced that many roles yet. The layoffs that have happened more recently this year and last year in the tech sector have actually been probably more related to the investments they're making in AI infrastructure. Right. And having to build out massive data center capacity and invest heavily within that area. So I think that's probably had more of an impact where their CFOs have had to look at their balance sheets and say, well, if we're going to make these hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in our AI infrastructure, then we need to make cost reductions in other areas.
And are you seeing this play out quite consistently internationally across the globe? Are there certain regions, and as you mentioned, you just come back from spending some time in the UK. As we look at the global landscape, are different regions approaching this differently?
Yes, certainly. I think the US for the last 4 or 5 years now has really reduced their interest level in Asia as a region for them. They've become a little bit more focused on their home market and perhaps the Europe or EMEA markets as well. So they've been focusing a lot more on their hiring in their home markets rather than their Asia expansions that they had previously. So that kind of inflow of investment has really slowed down. And so what I've seen is that local clients and conglomerates within the Southeast Asia region, of which there's many, have continued to hire during this time. But the positions that they're now hiring are very different to the positions that they were hiring 5 years ago.
Yeah. So directly then, what does it mean for leaders or aspiring leaders, right? As you look at these shifts in the requirements of jobs and roles, if I was someone sitting at home thinking about this sector and preparing myself to be, at the forefront of organizations in the tech sector, what do I need to know?
I think that you need to experiment a lot more with the latest technology. I think that you need to network and to build relationships and develop networks when you don't need them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And I think that you should approach events that are put to you and also networking possibilities, speaking engagements, especially for leaders. And I think all of that feeds through to having a consistent online presence so that you're consistently posting and sharing relevant and consistent information to your network. And I think that would help leaders today.
So don't underestimate the power of your LinkedIn posts and commenting and resharing. Okay, that's really interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are watching.
Okay. Yes, eyes on you. So what else do we need to brace for? It's still, we're 2026, this has been going on for a while. What else is upcoming?
I think a massive shift in talent and in terms of the difference between the convergence of what is required of people. So I think that they now need a archetype leader that has AI, data driven, and has the commercial aspects. But there's fragmentation in the availability of that talent. Right. And I think leaders are underestimating the lack of talent in those areas across the globe, but especially here in Southeast Asia. But even in Europe, I mean, last week in London, I had clients telling me that they were having candidates poached to the west coast of the US.
Wow.
And the UK clients just could not compete with the offers that they were being presented with on the West Coast.
Got it. And I think that's a very nice segue, I guess, into the next several questions that I wanted to ask, because at Odgers, our work is very much about finding leaders who can help tech companies unlock new sources of growth and value. So what do you think in the work, or what are you seeing in the work we are doing right now, are the leadership traits or behaviors that are proving most valuable to organizations?
I think the most valuable traits that leaders have now, or proving the most valuable to organizations, are actually non-technical. I think it's become far more focused on soft skills, so emotional intelligence, mental agility, adaptability, communication, vision, and these things have really come to the forefront now that we're managing diverse, multi-generational workforces as well, with a lot of anxiety in the perhaps the younger elements of the workforce, but certainly across the workforce there is uncertainty and anxiety about what the future holds and what artificial intelligence will mean for them and their positions as we move forward. So I think that whole leading with authentic leadership has really come into the forefront now. Perhaps it wasn't as high a priority some years back.
So when you touched on authentic leadership, for you personally, when you also advise clients or even candidates that we have, going for interviews or, entering new organizations and setting them up for success in the tech sector, right? What does authenticity mean?
I think the authenticity starts with honesty. I think it starts with answering questions that your team, your leadership teams, and all of the employees of the organization have with brutal honesty. It's telling people what you know to be true, what you think could happen, and what we simply don't know, and being very honest about that. And I think people will appreciate that now more than ever when there is this kind of uncertainty that people have, and there's a lot of questions that they will have for leadership teams. So they need to approach it with empathy, but with honesty. And I think there has to be consistency in their leadership, that they will deal with everyone situationally differently, but they will be consistent in the message that they have for all people in their organization.
Right. And what guidance or what advice might you have for perhaps, people and leaders who have been at the helm for a very long time with certain styles and certain characteristics that people are very used to? That shift in terms of the way they need to engage a different generation, right? Amidst, as we call this uncertainty, what would maybe one piece of advice you would have for them?
I think that brings up a very interesting point, Karen. I think because since we're now having to implement artificial intelligence across organizations, there's this big movement now, which you've probably heard of, called unlearn. And that's actually particularly hard to do. We all know change is difficult, and unlearning is also very difficult. And so I think that's something I would advise senior leaders to do, is to kind of look at the ways of working they've had for the last 10, 20 years and really evaluate, is that working? And perhaps there is a different way of doing things. And it goes back to what I said earlier about what is a good value for a exceptional leader to have.
Yeah.
And I think continual learning is a great one. And that applies to leadership as it does to any sort of new technology that you may wish to learn about.
Right. And taking that on yourself, right? It's not about waiting for the organization to send you to courses or making you use different tools and making that available. It's really taking that on yourself.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, you've got to be responsible for that yourself and take control of that. But the pressure is on leaders to actually embed AI into their organizations. Basically, they need to affect massive organizational change across all their workflows, across their operating models, and also their staff and how they operate.
Another curiosity that I have in in tech or big tech, right? I think, again, more than any other industry, top leaders in tech firms just seem to be in the spotlight so much, right? They can be these larger-than-life CEOs with big personalities. Their names are brought up at the dinner table, very much household names. Sam Altman's, the Jeff Bezos, and maybe closer to home, the Jensen Huangs and Jack Ma. I even say that maybe the average person wouldn't be able to name top CEOs from pharma companies or airlines, right? It's a very different kind of sector. Why do you think that is? And what is it about tech, that has had these kinds of leaders emerging?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you look at the Fortune 500 and you look at the top 10 companies and how that's changed in the last 50 years, from banking and oil and gas, financial services, to tech. And I think that's come to the forefront. And these companies have grown massively. They have some of the biggest valuations in the world. So all the financial markets are paying attention to them. And that obviously leads to the media attention that they then get. And so the leaders of those companies have then, as a result, been in the spotlight because of that.
Yeah. And also, I may hazard to say that looking at that leadership from a distance, right, and learning about leadership to a certain extent from media reports, we're looking at headlines. And that may also be shaping perceptions about what it means to be a leader, right? So you have this big personalities and people speaking at home. Is that something I want to aspire to? I mean, given the work that you're doing as a headhunter and what's realistically expected of leaders, and then you have these big personalities, what's your observations of that?
I think it becomes a different role. I think it becomes more of a media external facing role at that level for them. So they need to be far more trained with the media. They need to be the visionaries, and they need to present themselves as such. And I think that their role has evolved because of the size and attention that they now get. So I think that their leadership would be somewhat different, perhaps companies or leaders in companies that don't have that kind of media attention,
right?
For good or bad.
Yeah. So different styles of leadership for different stages of the life cycle of an organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hear you. Paul, you also lead the Chief Information Officer practice at Odgers for the region. And I'd be curious to understand your perspectives, placing leaders into these senior roles. And today, I'd like to understand a little bit more about those boundaries between, CTO and CIO, CDO, whether it be the D for digital or the D for data. How are organizations clarifying those distinctions? Or is there a move towards consolidation and convergence?
It's a great question. So when we get invited to speak with clients about their technology parts of their business, we would start with understanding what they already have. Because one thing we've had recently is lots of clients asking us to help them with chief AI officer searches, which is a new position. But even then, we need to understand, what do they currently have? Do they already have a chief digital officer? Do they have a chief information officer, a chief technology officer? How are they structured and how will this fit in? It's more about the challenges they have and then working out the responsibilities of the new role and how that will interact with the other senior leadership members to achieve the goals that the clients want to achieve. The lines have been blurred for a long time, but I've seen that sometimes they haven't worked out. If you look at telecoms operators across the region, for example, they all had chief digital officers sort of 5-6 years ago. Now most of them don't have that. And what I observed was that the telecoms operators that had a CDO or chief digital officer that also had the CIO responsibility and the full IT stack were far more successful than those were brought in as an add-on that didn't have the budget control, they didn't have the teams, and they just didn't have the mandate to affect a massive organizational change, which is what the chief digital officer was intended to do. And so now we don't really have that anymore across that sector.
And so would you be looking for specific, experiences or characteristics or traits, to perhaps evolve into one of those roles? Are there distinctions about the kind of people that you're looking for?
Absolutely. And I think the CIO role especially historically had been a keep the lights on, business as usual, keep the network running, have strong 99.9% uptime, and which was not easy, by the way. But now that has really changed, and the expectations of the CIO has become one more where it's not a cost center, it's a revenue generating part of the business. And they need the CIO to be the person in the organization that fully understands what AI means for their organization and can explain that to the board and the senior leadership team in commercially understandable ways. And that has not historically been a normal part of the job description for a CIO.
Understood. So ultimately, those differences, if there's still those distinctions, would it be, oftentimes if an organization looks at, the structure, would those differences be a capability question, a reporting line question, or a maturity of the organization question?
I guess a mixture of all of those. I think you need to start with what you already have in the organization first, and then look at what you're trying to achieve, what the challenges are, and then by bringing in this new role, whether we call that a chief technology officer or a chief digital officer, it's about what they are expected to achieve and how they will achieve that with the rest of the leadership team. They need to be aligned. They need to be working together. Silos have been broken down with AI. So that's the kind of skills that they'll be looking for. It's adaptability, mental agility, their ability to work across functionally and with far more commercial insight than they typically had previously.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And so if we look forward, I asked you previously about what we need to brace for, but looking just a little bit more, into the future around the next 12, 18 months, 24 months, what would you see as the biggest challenges that will be facing the tech sector? And where are the biggest opportunities? Yeah,
sure. So I think the biggest challenges will be operationalizing AI and getting, firm results from the initiatives that they've had. The leaders agree and understand that the era is here now and the hype is dying down, and now it is about operationalizing and really understanding the impact on their organization, but first and foremost, their customers and what that means. Because if they implement these programs too quickly or too swiftly, they may fall down. And if they don't work, you can lose customers very, very quickly. And so there needs to be a lot more focus on that. That's a big, big challenge for the companies and clients that we work with. So I think the opportunity is to turn the innovation into economic results. And that is a big opportunity that exists for most of our clients.
And with that, then, when we talk about leadership over the next 2 years, given what you have just said, what do the most senior executives need to think about as they continue to build followership and engagement and, bringing other people along on that journey?
So my advice would be keep learning and ignore the hype and experiment as much as you can with AI. And I think use it to make your lives better and to make your jobs easier. And once you start using agentic AI to do that, you'll start realizing the benefits on a greater scale, and you can start directing more initiatives.
Thank you. I think that's a great piece of advice for everyone listening. Really glad you could join us today, Paul. Appreciate your insights.
Thanks, Karen. It's been a great conversation.